You've been lied to. You probably think you know what bad medicine looks like, maybe some leeches or a dubious herbal cure. But here is the truth about just how truly unhinged historical medical practices could get. In the 1920s, pharmacies didn't just sell questionable tonics, they sold bottles packed with pure radium. Yes, the same radioactive element that powers nuclear reactors was marketed as a miracle health drink. Doctors prescribed it, promising cures for everything from blindness to impotence. The reality, it made your jaw rot, your bones crumble, and your corpse so radioactive it needed a lead-lined coffin. Get ready, because history's cures are far more terrifying than you can imagine. Alright, buckle up, because if you thought drinking glowing radioactive water was wild, you haven't heard anything yet. Let's dive right into our first mind-blowing story from history about something truly unbelievable. When teeth go boom. Imagine this, it's the 1800s, and people are just living their lives. Maybe they're having the worst toothache ever, the kind that makes you want to run around like a crazy person. Then, suddenly, without warning, bang! Your tooth literally explodes into tiny pieces right inside your mouth. No, really. We're talking about a blast so loud it sounded like a small pistol firing, and it could even cause temporary hearing loss. Can you even imagine the shock and terror? This wasn't just a crazy dream either, it actually happened to multiple people between 1817 and 1874. There was even a reverend from Pennsylvania who had it really bad. After his tooth went off like a tiny firecracker, all his intense pain surprisingly vanished. What a bizarre way to cure a toothache. Right, so, what on earth caused teeth to become tiny time bombs? Well, back then, dentists, the people who help keep our teeth healthy, sometimes used metal fillings made from different types of metals, like tin and lead. And here's the crazy part, when these different metals were mixed together, sometimes even in the same mouth, they could accidentally create tiny batteries. These dental batteries would then produce a special kind of gas called hydrogen, right inside your tooth. So, you had a small pocket of explosive gas trapped inside, just waiting for something to set it off, maybe lighting a cigarette, or even just the right chemical reaction happening in your mouth. Luckily for us, these explosive teeth cases mysteriously stopped appearing after the 1920s, probably because dentists finally realized that turning people's mouths into little chemical weapon zones wasn't exactly the best healthcare strategy. Modern dentistry might not sound as exciting, but at least you don't have to worry about your fillings turning your mouth into a minefield. Phew, what a relief, huh? Okay, so exploding teeth were pretty wild. Right, imagine having a mini firecracker go off in your mouth, but hold on to your hats, because our next story is even crazier, and maybe a little bit grosser. Are you ready for this? Number 6. Imagine you're living in medieval Europe, and you've got a really bad headache. You go to the pharmacy, but instead of pills, the shopkeeper pulls out a jar of ground up mummy. Yes, you heard that right. We're talking about actual human mummies from ancient Egypt, crushed into a fine powder. For hundreds of years, people in Europe were literally eating mummies, believing it would cure all their illnesses. Talk about a weird health snack. So, how did this super strange idea even start? Well, it all began with a big mix-up, kind of like when you accidentally grab someone else's lunch. There was a healing substance from the Middle East called mumia. But someone got confused and thought that actual mummies had the same magical healing powers. Oops, big mistake soon. Merchants started digging up ancient Egyptian tombs and shipping those mummies all the way to Europe. It became like the world's first international delivery service for ancient bodies. Can you believe it? The demand for this mummy powder got so incredibly high that if they couldn't find enough old mummies, some merchants would just take fresh dead bodies, wrap them up to look ancient, and then grind those up instead. So, people weren't just eating mummies from thousands of years ago. They were sometimes eating their recently deceased neighbors too. Gross people used this powder for everything. Got epilepsy. Take some mummy powder, bleeding wound, just sprinkle a little bit of dead person on it. Even artists got in on the action. They made a special paint color called mummy brown by mixing ground up mummies with their paints. So, there might be famous old paintings out there made with actual human remains. Wild, this super bizarre and kinda yucky practice went on for hundreds of years until, finally, Someone with a bit more sense realized that eating dead people probably wasn't the best way to cure a tummy ache or a headache. Phew, good thing doctors are much smarter now, right? No mummy smoothies for us. Okay, so no mummy smoothies for us, good. But what about drilling holes in your head? Number 5, head holes for headaches. Imagine having a super bad headache, the kind that makes you want to curl up in a ball. Back in ancient times, people had a really unique solution for that. Ready for it? They would drill a hole right into their skull, I know. Right. Sounds super scary, but this wasn't just a rare, crazy thing. Archaeologists, who are like history detectives, have actually found over 1,500 ancient skulls with these deliberate holes in them. And get this, most of these people actually survived. We can tell because the bone around the holes shows signs of healing. They were walking around with actual holes in their heads. How wild is that? So, why did they do this? Well, ancient people believed that evil spirits could get trapped inside your head and cause all sorts of problems like bad headaches or seizures. So, their logical solution was to give those spirits an escape hatch. Bye-bye, evil spirit, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And some people even kept the removed piece of skull as a good luck charm. I guess a piece of someone's skull is one way to say good luck. Right. They had different ways of doing this, i.e. brain surgery, which they called trepanning. Some would slowly scrape away at the skull with sharp stones until they got through. Others used hand-powered drills. Imagine your head turning into a mini construction site. Some even cut out little rectangular windows in people's skulls, like they were installing tiny skylights. This is actually the oldest known surgery in human history, but it wasn't always just about spirits and magic. Sometimes, they did this to help people with serious head injuries. If someone fell and cracked their skull, drilling a hole could actually help reduce the pressure on their brain, which is pretty clever for ancient times. So, next time you feel a little headache coming on and reach for a tiny pill, just be super thankful that you weren't born a few thousand years ago. Imagine having to get a head hole just to feel better. Phew. What a relief we have modern medicine. Alright, ready for another super weird story from the past. You just heard how lucky we are not to need holes drilled in our heads for headaches. But guess what? Modern medicine wasn't always so super safe either. Number 4. Glow-in-the-dark health tonics. Imagine walking into a pharmacy in the 1920s, that's only about 100 years ago, and seeing bottles of medicine that literally glowed in the dark. How cool would that be? Well, not cool at all, actually. These glowing bottles were packed with something super dangerous, pure radium. That's the same stuff they use in nuclear reactors. Really powerful and not good for you at all. But back then, people actually sold this radioactive glowing liquid as a health tonic. They thought it could cure everything, from headaches to making you feel younger and stronger. The most popular one was called Radithor. Doctors were even telling people to drink it. Can you believe it? They claimed it could cure blindness, make you look like a teenager again, and even bring dying horses back to life. One man named Ibn Bayers was so convinced it was amazing, he drank 3 bottles of Radithor every single day. He thought he was living his best life, getting super healthy. But then, something horrible happened. His jaw literally started to fall apart. His teeth fell out, holes appeared in his skull, and his bones just crumbled away. When he finally passed away, they had to bury him in a special coffin lined with lead because his body was still dangerously radioactive, and it gets even crazier. The companies selling this stuff made so much money, they didn't care about the danger. They hired young women, who were called radium girls, to paint watch dials with glow-in-the-dark radium paint. To keep their paintbrushes pointed and neat, these girls were told to lick them. Years later, their teeth started falling out, their jaws began to rot, and some of them even started to glow in the dark themselves from all the radium inside them. The radium craze finally ended in the 1930s when people finally realized that drinking radioactive water was deadly, but by then, countless people had already been poisoned by these glowing health tonics. Phew, glad we have real medicine now. Right, no more glowing drinks for us. Alright, we've talked about exploding teeth and glowing but dangerous drinks, but what if I told you that in the olden days, even animals had to go to court? That's right. Number 3, when animals went on trial. Imagine this, it's medieval Europe, super long ago. If your neighbor's pig wandered into your yard and ate your baby's lunch, you wouldn't just scold the pig or chase it away. Oh no, you'd take that pig to court. These weren't just simple tellings off. These were full-blown trials with real judges, lawyers, and even professional executioners. And get this, the animals even got their own defense attorneys. Can you believe it? In the year 1386, in a place called France, a pig was actually put on trial for eating infants on the street. Yes, really, the pig was found guilty. Before they punished it, they even dressed the pig in human clothes, including a fancy new suit. Then, after mutilating its head and legs, they hanged it right there in the town square. Super creepy, right? And it wasn't just that one pig. In 1457, they arrested an entire pig family, Mama Pig and her 6 little piglets, for murdering a child. The court brought in witnesses and experts to tell their stories. Luckily for the little piglets, there wasn't enough proof that they helped their mom with the murder, so they were set free. But Mama Pig, she was convicted and hanged by her back legs as punishment. They put all kinds of animals on trial: 2 dogs, cows, horses, and even tiny insects. If rats were eating up all your crops, you could take them to a special church court instead of a normal one. These little pests would then be excommunicated, meaning priests would stand in the fields and tell swarms of locusts they were banned from church. There was even a rooster put on trial in a city called Basel just for laying an egg. People thought this egg might hatch into some kind of mythical demon creature. The poor rooster was found guilty and burned at the stake. Phew. What a wild time when even animals had to face the law, sometimes for the silliest reasons. Alright, we've talked about animals going to court for their mischief, but what if your doctor, instead of giving you a lollipop or a shot, offered you a jar full of slimy, wiggling worms? Gross. Right. Well, get ready for number 2, leeches. Imagine this, it's the 1800s, not that long ago, and you've got a really bad headache. You visit the doctor, hoping for some magic pills, but instead, he pulls out a big jar of these blood-sucking creatures. Yuck, these little leeches were like the Swiss Army knife for doctors back then. Got a headache, slap a leech on your head, fever making you feel hot and bothered. More leeches, please. Even if you just stubbed your toe, it was leech time. Doctors in those days had a super strange belief. They thought all sickness came from having bad blood, or just too much blood in your body. So, their smart solution was to simply drain it out. And what better way to do that than with a bunch of hungry leeches? Each one of these tiny vampires could suck up to 10 milliliters of blood. That's like filling up 2 whole teaspoons with your vital fluids. The French people were especially obsessed with these little guys. They imported millions of leeches every single year, like they were the latest fashion trend. It wasn't just doctors either. If you went to a barber for a haircut, they might even offer to cut you open and let you bleed. That's actually why those cheerful barber poles are red and white. The red stands for blood, and the white stands for bandages. So that happy pole outside is basically an old advertisement saying, "We used to drain people's blood here, but guess what? This whole bleeding thing usually made people feel much worse, not better." Can you imagine being sick with the flu and then losing cups of blood on top of that? Doctors thought they were balancing your body, but they were actually just making you weaker and weaker. Sadly, some people even died from losing too much blood. Here's the wildest part. Leeches are actually making a comeback in modern medicine. Doctors use them in special tiny surgeries because their saliva has amazing stuff that stops blood from clotting. So, these creatures went from being a weird, old-fashioned medicine to a legitimate, helpful medical tool in some cases today. How cool and a little bit gross is that? Alright, get ready for the grand finale. Number 1, we've seen exploding teeth, eaten mummies, drilled holes in heads, and even used leeches. But how about a beauty treatment that was so painful? It sounds like something out of a spooky story. Imagine you're a little 5-year-old girl in ancient China. Your mom tells you it's time for a special beauty treatment. Sounds nice, right? Well, not this one. This was called footbinding, and it was incredibly tough. First, your tiny feet would be soaked in hot water until they were super soft and bendy. Then, your mom would take all your toes, except for the big one, and break them. Yes, literally break them. She would bend those broken toes underneath your foot and wrap them incredibly tight with long silk bandages. So tight that your feet would actually start turning purple because the blood couldn't flow properly. Every few days, she would unwrap the bandages, check your feet, and if any of your broken toes tried to heal back straight, she would break them again. Then, she'd wrap them even tighter. And here's the hardest part: you had to walk around on these broken, mangled feet. The more you walked, the more your feet would get crushed and folded into a smaller, stranger shape. This super painful process would go on for about 2 to 3 years until your feet were permanently squished and twisted into a tiny triangle shape. The goal was to make your feet only about 3 inches long. That's roughly the size of a credit card. Super tiny feet were considered beautiful and a sign of high status in ancient China, and it was thought to help girls find a good husband. Can you believe that? This kind of torture, all for beauty, went on for hundreds of years. Luckily, times have changed, and we don't have to suffer through anything like that anymore. Phew. So, there you have it. Who knew our world was full of such unexpected twists? My mind is definitely blown. But what about yours? Which facts surprised you the most? Stay curious. See ya!